Len Ward began his entrepreneurial journey in 2004 when he left behind a successful career in finance to take on a partnership role in an e-commerce startup. Through that experience, Len realized that he was more interested in marketing products than in selling them. He took this newfound passion for marketing and turned it into Rank Me SEO, an online marketing agency. Today, Len has channeled his passion for investing in marketing into Commexis, a marketing consulting firm specializing in financial auditing, investment allocation, and reporting of digital marketing campaigns. In short, Commexis solves your digital marketing ROI problems and will teach you how to optimize your investment to improve your ROI. Now, welcome Len Ward to the Water Cooler Hangout. Welcome to the Water Cooler Hangout podcast. I'm your host, Bob Poole. For over 45 years, I've been helping sales and marketing leaders and entrepreneurs grow and prosper by creating extraordinary experiences for their customers. Here at the Water Cooler Hangout, we chat with influential and successful guests who share their real-life stories about their careers and companies. Their successes, failures, and stories will resonate with you and leave you wanting to hear more. We'll learn how all of us are connected and how we share the same kind of challenges, fears, wants, needs, and dreams. My sincerest desire is that you hear something today that helps you create the job, the business, and the life you want and deserve. Hi, Len. Good morning, and welcome to the Water Cooler Hangout. How are you doing?
Good morning. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So we're almost neighbors. I'm over here in Bucks County, and you're across the river over in I guess you'd call that South Jersey, right?
South Jersey, yeah. My office is in Haddonfield, but currently I'm at my home in Voorhees right now. Yeah, so we're not too far. And I got a lot of family up in Bucks County, so I know the area well.
You have a company called Commexis.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about Commexis, just to start with.
There's kind of like three divisions of us right now. We're kind of actually in the process of really rebranding and reinventing who we are, but we are at our core a creative development shop, digital agency. And then the third part that's emerging is a ROI consulting shop, which is in time going to be kind of splintered off and broken off into its own right, which basically focuses on analytics, return on investments for your marketing and sales budget, which we'll probably touch on obviously in the show. But at our core for what we do, it is a classic digital agency with creative design, development, and so forth.
So you've been doing that for a long time in the digital world, from what I saw in your biography.
Yeah, I've been involved in the digital space probably we're moving closer to 20 years now. This is the second agency that I've started. So the first agency was Rank Me SEO, started as a freelancer before Rank Me SEO, and then Commexis after I acquired a creative shop, this is the iteration that we're in right now.
So I've got to ask you now, okay? Mm-hmm. So I read your biography and I saw that you have a degree in criminal justice. And it looks like your first job from there was as a stockbroker.
Yeah.
There's probably a bad joke in there somewhere, but So criminal justice to stockbroker, how'd that happen?
Yeah, it's been quite a run. Initially, when I went to school, I was going in to be an attorney. I wanted to be an attorney and I wanted to work in the FBI because I found out I was fortunate enough to be able to caddy at a golf course, was able to meet a lot of people. And I always had a passion for FBI, solving crime and so forth. And as a kid, you just always liked that stuff. And I remember talking to a few people and the FBI always intrigued me. And I remember, speaking to a couple of FBI people I was fortunate to caddy for, they said, one of the quickest routes to get in here is to be an attorney. They said actually have a law degree. And that's what it was. Christ, we're going back in the early 90s. So I don't even know what it is now. But so I was like, okay, I'm going to go for criminal justice, and I'll see what I can do. So I went to criminal justice and, everything was going there. And I had every intention. I was like, okay, then the FBI thing kind of faded. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to want to be an attorney. I really had no aspirations to be a police officer or anything like that. It was more, okay, if I'm not FBI, I'm an attorney. And go from there. And then 3/4 of the way through, I had a friend of mine who was working at Morgan Stanley. I was kind of one of those guys where it was taking about 5 or 6 years to get through college. And he's like, you want to have an interview over, what at that time was Dean Witter, before Dean Witter was acquired by Morgan Stanley. I went on an interview and I got hired.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, there it is. My dreams of being a lawyer are over, and here I am on Wall Street.
Wonderful. It's a good story. It's sort of like a lot of us, I guess, we end up in things that we didn't really plan to be. I mean, my degree was in English and biology,
There you go.
And I became a photographer. So first,
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is funny how it happens. So from the criminal justice stockbroker, okay, and then you founded the SEO and web development company.
Believe it or not, after being a stockbroker, I moved over to Credit Suisse, which was investment banking, which really gave me the foundation of understanding finance, really understanding how balance sheets work, earnings reports, really understood the underbelly of what was going on in the financial world. I was fortunate enough to work there. I guess I was there about 6 or 7 years. I forget, right around there. And after that, I moved into, the days of Wall Street, you get burnt out. So I went from retail to institution. And at that stage, it was just done. And then I had an opportunity to join with somebody to start an e-commerce company. Okay. And we started an e-commerce company right after the dot-com bubble, a couple of years after that. And how I got into the agency was we hired an SEO agency to do work for us because we saw the power of Google and that back then. It's funny because when I was doing investment banking, I remember Google when it was going public. I remember Amazon was going public. We were part of those teams of watching that stuff happen.
Yeah.
So we came into this e-commerce saying, look, this is the next thing that's going to happen. Kind of like where people are right now, cryptocurrency. We were like that back then. And did the e-commerce thing. And we realized that the company doing work for us, nothing was happening. Like we were getting all of our business still from like eBay, Craigslist. And we used to sell event tickets. That's how we were getting things. And I started doing a little bit of research on digital marketing. I'm like, I think what they're doing, it doesn't make any sense. So I literally stepped back. I taught myself every single thing I could. I actually went back to college to take some coding classes and I learned how to do it. I turned around and I did it for ourselves. And then what happened was the economy went sour, the housing boom went bust, and nobody was buying high-end event Broadway tickets or high-end event concert tickets. Like we used to sell like front row type stuff. I had a couple of people ask me, say, hey, that digital marketing thing you're doing, would you be able to do it for me? And I tried it for them. It worked a little bit. And next thing you know, I just started hustling, putting ads on Craigslist, putting an ad in a paper, believe it or not. When then people contact me, I freelanced. And then I literally say it all the time. I walked out of my little office I rented out one day. I came back in and I had eyeballs staring at me. They were my employees. That's how quick it grew. So that was the iteration of Rank Me SEO. And that's kind of where eventually that was the step before Commexis.
So what attracted you to marketing? I mean, was there anything that jumped up and said, I really love this for this reason?
I think I was always involved in marketing, even when I was working. If you think about it, even when I was working at Dean Witter, I was always trying to market myself or market why you need to be in these investment vehicles. And there was a unique way to market. So marketing them it's not just a cold call for sales. You have to market yourself on a cold call. You have to try to brand yourself on a cold call. And then I found myself at, when I was at Credit Suisse, one of my major jobs was to make sure that I could get research analysts and market them in front of potential mutual fund, clients and say, okay, we're bringing somebody through Baltimore. We'd really like to sit down and talk to you about Kodak, the stock, or, Tyco, the stock. And you would try to market that. You would market the whole event and build up an audience. So I think it was always involved in marketing in some capacity. It just wasn't called marketing, but that's what I was doing. And I think it was just a natural progression all the way through.
So the entrepreneurial bug bit you though.
Bit me hard. I can't go back. That's why I said, I tell people all the time, I'm unemployable. So,
yeah.
But it bit me hard. And, I think the entrepreneurial bug hit me where the e-commerce thing went well. And I think that was good. But how I got into digital marketing, be quite frank, I think people forget how hard it was back in 07, 08, 09. We were beat up as a country. It was survival. I had a wife, I had kids, I had a mortgage.
Right.
I'm like, okay, Wall Street wasn't hiring at that time. That was when the whole Occupy Wall Street thing was happening. I'm like, can I go back? Yeah. I think I'm qualified, but nobody was hiring and the money was changing back then. So it was almost a gun to my head, like you need to do this digital marketing thing because it's really the only option you have right now. And, when you're threatened with something like that, you'll make it work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. And yeah, you were in near the beginning. I actually started a software development company back in the early 90s. So it was, we started off in mainframes and then before you knew it, it was all about desktop and Windows and things changed fast.
Yeah, they did.
So right now, Commexis talks a lot about ROI for marketing. So, which has always been the big question is throughout my consulting days. How do I know if I'm getting a return on my investment on what I'm spending on this marketing campaign, on this marketing stuff we do? How do we measure that? And you guys have come up with a solution?
We think we have. I don't know if it's probably better for me just to kind of just do an overview of how we got there. It was more of, we were a classic digital agency. And like every digital agency will tell you, you have clients coming in and out the front door. It happens all the time. Every ad agency, sometimes you have good ad agencies have really good clients that are there for years, but there's always this rotating thing with clients. And, I got to the point where, you had clients always sitting there looking at you saying, well, I don't know, but like you just said, what's my ROI? I don't know what I'm getting out of this. I can't make sense of these numbers. And it would happen more and more. And it was about 3 or 4 clients, I think, that really kind of pushed me to the edge where I'm like, you know what? I want to answer the question, because I kept coming back and saying, well, I can't give you ROI metrics. I don't know. What are you going for? Like, you wanted me to put you on Google. You wanted me to put you on Facebook and to try to generate you leads. That's what we did. What do you mean ROI? That's not my responsibility. And I said, well, what if we kind of step back and let's try to solve the problem? And I basically said, all right, this isn't about a self-glorification, but I'm like, all right, I'm trained in finance, working for an investment bank. I was a stockbroker, so I understand, finance with that as well. But it was more the understanding balance sheets, understanding cash flow and things like that. I really learned that when I was at Credit Suisse. I ran my own e-commerce company. I'm running my own digital marketing agency. I'm like, okay, so I can tie the digital marketing metrics together with, I understand the finance and being an entrepreneur. I'm like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be something. And I think we've arrived at something that is vastly more in depth than ROAS, return on ad spend, which is what a lot of people like to talk about.
Right.
And it's not that I think that's a bad metric, but the metric's very misleading. It's good if you're an e-commerce company, or if you're in an emergency service, like let's just say you're an emergency plumber, or you're a criminal attorney, you were arrested, or maybe emergency dentistry, then yes, you can directly tie something coming in from Google to the very back end because they clicked your ad and they called you, they made an appointment and so forth. But for the majority of B2B companies, B2B service companies, healthcare or universities, there's no way to tie that up. And again, I think we might have found a formula that helps that out.
Okay, good. So how does that tie in with customer acquisition cost? Because that's always my mantra, if you will, to clients is you need to know that first. Are you still using customer acquisition cost as part of determining ROI?
Yes, customer acquisition cost, in my estimation, is the most important allocation metric you need to understand in a marketing campaign. And the number one reason, there's 2 reasons why companies don't understand what their ROI is. Not why they can't arrive at their ROI, but 2 reasons why they don't understand what the ROI was. And the first one is they don't set a real number. They don't say, hey, Bob, I'm bringing your agency in and we're looking to do $1 million in business this year. Can you help me out with getting to $1 million? 99.9% of the time, nobody's telling that to an agency. And the second thing is their customer acquisition cost is they don't understand what truly goes in there. They don't understand the metrics that go into customer acquisition costs. And a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, here's what we did on ad spend. And some of the smarter ones will say, okay, here's what we did in sales. But they forget to put that MarTech in there, the CRM in there, the networking event, the business coaching, all the way through. And it's a huge pie that they realize that they're in. And then what happens is ultimately they go down and they'll say, well, the digital marketing isn't working. And the very first thing I'll do is I'll point to their customer acquisition costs and say, your digital marketing investment is 5% of your CAC. So you mean to tell me that this entire campaign is not working because of that 5% investment? And the minute you show that to a client, the minute they see that, the light bulb goes off or goes on, and they're like, okay, I guess I haven't been looking at this the right way. So those are the reasons why they can't ultimately get to an ROI, or why they don't understand what an ROI is, why they don't get to an ROI, or why companies sit in a boardroom and can't ultimately get over that hurdle is normally because they're just, again, not looking at the entire grand scheme of things. And there's a huge gap of data between the CFO and the CMO or the business owner and the agency. They just don't, they hate each other.
Yeah. I'm laughing now because the whole time you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, the last time I remember sitting with in a boardroom, the CEO was, I'll say, slightly weak, okay, compared to the CFO, who was just an iron fist. And of course, the chief marketing officer was there too. And I thought a fist fight was going to break out. I mean, it got heated. It got nasty. The CFO just wasn't believing that they were getting their money's worth. And he was demanding the marketing guy to show me the numbers. Show me how you can show me the numbers. Now, that was a long time ago that this took place. So hopefully things have gotten better. Or is there still that fight between the two?
No, you see it a lot. And I think that some of the reasons why there's a gap in data between everybody and so forth is that, the biggest problem we're facing right now is that marketing people are taught to talk to the CFO and taught to talk to the CEO or the business owner in vanity metrics. And by vanity metrics, I mean impressions and clicks and time on site and likes and shares. Look, from a strategy standpoint, that stuff matters. From a strategy standpoint, you need to understand those things so you know if your brand message is resonating or what you're doing is you're trying to work on things. But that doesn't tie in the finance. And I think that's the problem where the gap ends or starts because the marketing person, they don't understand what the ultimate revenue goal is. They don't understand what the operating margins are. They don't understand, what the gross margins are. Like they don't understand that. And they're at the mercy of basically showing you metrics And then a lot of times what companies are doing is they're going in and they're looking at, okay, what's my overhead? What's my operating expenses? Oh, and by the way, now here's the money I have left over for marketing. And that's the digital age. The smart companies that are making it, they don't do it that way. They start this way. What do we need for marketing and sales to address funnel deficiencies to get to the ultimate goal? Oh, and after that, we'll start looking at operating expenses and so forth. They know the power of what's happening with the digital space right now. And that's kind of where we are right now as an industry.
So where does sales fit in all that? VP of sales and that whole department? I was going to say there's usually that tension between sales and marketing also, as you know. So where does it fit in your formula here?
So I think the thing with sales and marketing is where the gap happens. And that there is a true divide between the two is because they're blaming each other. And I think if you look at the sales pipeline, it's the marketing job to basically try to help fill the top of that pipeline. It's the marketing's job, to help maybe work people through the middle of that funnel. Where the marketing team can still help is the bottom of the funnel to close, but that's where the sales really needs to kind of step in and help try to close it. One of the biggest things that we point out to clients why their campaign is failing or they're not making their ROI is because they have a really self-inflated value of their close rate. 50% of the time you see they'll come in and we start a complete financial audit, and I'll kind of walk through that in a little bit, but we start off with an audit, we kind of look at stuff, and one of the very first questions I ask is, what is your close rate? And it never fails. They come back and say, oh, we close 90% of the stuff that comes through. Everybody, no, you don't. I think it's just more like one of the major gaps is that there is a self-glorifying close rate. I just don't think the close rate is what people think it is. And I think people need to be a little bit more realistic with what their close rate truly is. I mean, if you are a product like an Uber or a Netflix, the close rate's really high. I mean, let's call it the way it is. But I think they do go about each other and they do argue with each other. And I think that's just because there is, what I think the core of it is they don't work together.
Yeah.
And they don't look at the work with the funnel together. Like sales looks at marketing and says, get me more leads. And marketing would get more leads, and marketing would say, well, we're expecting you to close that. And I think one of the biggest deficiencies that's happening right now is the majority of companies aren't letting marketing help them all the way through the pipeline. Retargeting campaigns, email drip campaigns. Are we geofencing certain things? If you're going out to a prospect, again, should we be geofencing them? Is there a piece of creative content that we can help you get there? So that's one of the reasons why marketing campaigns fail is because it operates in a silo. So marketing does their thing, sales does their thing, the CFO does their thing. Like the CFO is their money, they're going to allocate that to marketing, and marketing is going to allocate you got to take those walls down.
Yeah.
Considering conversions right now happen in an ecosystem, meaning like somebody could be touched 5 to 10 to 15 times digitally and traditionally before they convert. If you're operating in a silo and that's your problem, and you know where that starts from? Having that initial, here's our revenue goal. Right. We're at $1 million. This is what our current pipeline looks like. These are the deficiencies in the pipeline we have to address. Here's what the marketing is going to do to address those deficiencies. And here's what sales is going to do to help close those things. Those conversations are not happening at companies that are struggling. Those conversations are happening to the companies that are really thriving and doing well. I know that's kind of a bit of a loose term to say right now, because I think our economy is in a really weird spot right now where we're trying to get back to work. And I think everyone's mentality is just get money in the front door right now because we haven't made money in a year. But look, that's going to settle down in the next couple of quarters. And really having this conversation of ROI, marketing, and what I'm doing in the right way needs to be taking place in the fourth quarter. You need to get ready when the economy levels back out and we're back to where we are, because it's good times for a lot of people right now, bad times for other people. But I can tell you right now, those tables are going to flip in about a year's time and we're going to be back to normal.
Well, let's hope so. I do hope so. One thing that has happened that's been good in the last, I think about 10, 15 years, maybe, if that, is what they're calling sales development, which is a nice term for inside sales. And HubSpot was the first that kind of pushed it. And so you have a team out there that's really, they're sort of marketing and they're sort of sales. They really work for sales, and I think of them as sales people that they do themselves. And their goal is to get out of that job and move into a more lucrative position of outside sales or something like that. But what they're doing is they're helping marketing, that gap between marketing and sales, where they're providing more qualified leads, where the salesperson themselves doesn't have to spend as much time generating leads and not selling. So it allows the sales rep to sell 80% of the time instead of 20%. Have you seen that in any of the financial audits you've done? Have you sales development? Is that a number that's been popping up?
You mean where people are actually doing sales and marketing at the same time?
Well, just doing basically developing sales is what they're doing, and they do that through digital types of methodologies.
You mean kind of like social selling or just kind of like that type of thing? Or
social selling, just sort of cold calling. They could do that. A lot of them are cold calling into companies and using social media to get to decision makers high up. The job that you might think of an outside salesperson, a direct salesperson would have done years ago, they're doing it and then passing that on to the salesperson.
You would think you're almost talking about a table setter.
Yeah.
Like a table setter per se, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've heard that for a while. Yeah.
My thing is if it fits in the customer acquisition cost, then great. If you feel as if that role is addressing the funnel deficiency, then bring it in, which means the funnel deficiencies where, we have a really tough time of building a brand awareness and getting a qualified prospect in. Like we get leads, but they're not qualified, or leads are coming in, but we're not nurturing it in the right way to get it to qualified table setter. Then by all means, you need to put that in a customer acquisition cost. But when you are making that hire, whether you want to call it an aspirational hire or not, but when you are making that hire, you have to look at your customer acquisition cost and say to yourself, okay, is this the right thing to put in our customer acquisition cost? Is this definitively going to address a funnel deficiency, which is ultimately going to get us to our revenue goal? I think you hire that person when you know that there's a specific need in the funnel. You don't hire that person if you're getting to it and saying, look, we don't have a problem with leads. We don't have a problem with the middle of the funnle. We're just not closing. Well, the table setter ain't going to help you. You only hire predicated on exactly what that funnel needs. And I think is yet another mistake that companies are making. They're just saying, oh, well, we need another salesperson. Yeah. Do you? Or do you need to spend more money on Google because your leads aren't there? And I think that's one of the things we do is we get companies to start looking at the entire picture. Stop worrying about where you're ranking on Google. We're only going to make decisions on revenue goal and what the funnel deficiencies are. And from there, we'll start looking at everything.
Yeah. Yeah. With my company, which we're not active right now at all at doing what you do. But I can remember for years, one of the first things a client would say to me is like, I want to be on the first page of Google. I want to rank number 1 on Google. That was what they wanted first.
It mattered back then.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years that is, that you're discussing or talking about, but that's the way people found you back then. And they still do to a point. One of the things we do, it just gets to that, is to address funnel deficiencies, we have to market properly across the buyer's journey, which are the 5 phases of an individual looking for a product. And when you want to be found on Google, which is search engine optimization, and you want to be found on the first page, which also could be pay-per-click or Google Maps or whatever you want it to be, that means an individual has an intent to come in to find out more about your product and potentially purchase, which puts you square in the middle of the funnel. That's more of like, okay, we know if that person comes in, they're probably a qualified prospect. So to be focused on that type of marketing right now, you ask yourself a question, is that where we need to address right now? The problem with that, and I'll break off in a tangent, is that historically that was, I want to be found first on Google, and that was a search engine optimization tactic. People kill me for it. I'm an SEO guy at my heart. That's where I started. That was my core of what I've done for marketing, but SEO clearly does not have the impact it used to have. If you're an e-commerce company, if you're selling products and so forth, it's different. It's a huge difference now. But if you have a website of 10 pages, you're a consulting business and you're trying to be known, I'm sorry. If you're trying to generate leads right now at this exact moment, you're either going to purchase the leads or you're going to be doing pay-per-click. Because if you're just running an SEO campaign, you're just doing one little small part of the buyer's journey, you're not going to get anything back from that.
Yep, I agree with you. So let's say I'm a potential client, or I am a client. I say, hey, I want to sign up. What's the process? What happens? What's your first step? Where do you go?
So we basically talk to the client about, we're pretty much one of your ultimate zero-based planning type tools. And the first thing we do is we basically send out a questionnaire to clients that goes via email. It's very easy. You can import all your data directly into the actual email that we're sending to you. And the questionnaire basically starts off with, what's the revenue goal? Definitive, not better than last year, not, hey, it'd be nice to. No, we want, is it $1 million? Is it 1.5? Or we will do, maybe we need 100 units sold or 200 units sold, but we need some sort of number to go with. When we have that, then we kind of break them down and we kind of ask them to kind of discuss their sales funnel, what the sales funnels look like. We then take a look at what their existing marketing is, what they're doing. We then ask a bunch of questions to build the customer acquisition cost. And when they start with us, they send us the questionnaire. We then turn around and build a reporting dashboard for them, and it gives them their current ROI. And it shows them exactly the rate of return they have. So, okay, this is where you were in 2020 or currently in 2021. Here's your rate of return. Then we all get together, whether in person, which we can do now, or we do a Zoom meeting, and we start auditing the board and we start going through things. Okay, well, you're only at 500,000. We're halfway through the year and you want to get to 1.5 million. Well, here's where your problems are. We start looking at the funnels and we say, here's your funnel issues. And we talk about that. And then we kind of drop down and say, do you notice how your marketing is going right now? Your marketing is addressing things that have nothing to do with your funnels. which basically means your marketing and your sales team are not talking to each other. We're going to get them to talk to each other. So we reallocate their investment in sales and marketing across the buyer's journey. And then we go in and say, okay, let's look at the customer acquisition cost. You don't need this. The agency can handle that. Your marketing person should be doing this. And we reallocate that and we say, okay, there's your money. Then we kind of go through it all and we look at the rate of return they have to get to. The thing that gets a little touchy with customers is we do need to know their gross margins. We do need to know their operating expenses to a point, because we have a rule and we say your operating expenses cannot control your marketing budget. Maybe it did in the past, but I'm going to tell you why it does. And this is where my Wall Street kicks in. Mm-hmm. The single reason why the market did as good as it did, and everybody wants to say the ape traders and AMC and Bitcoin, whatever, the reason it did well is because the smart mutual fund managers out there knew that the people that are running the game right now are Google and Facebook. Yeah, Amazon obviously is huge, but it's Google and Facebook. And they knew that every single ad dollar that used to be on TV, radio, billboards, everywhere was all going to those two platforms now, all of it. And that's why their stocks were growing. If you go look at their earnings reports, they were growing exponentially. Right. People realized that not only were all businesses were coming there marketing, because that's where all the eyeballs were. So that's why we try to get clients to understand, like, you really, really need to understand what your investment has to be. So that's kind of what we do. We kind of bring that all there. And then we basically show them, it's like, okay, well, if you have a bunch of car wraps, or you really like that networking event, or that sales coach is great, or, hey, we do these sponsorships for all this stuff and it's kind of vanity vain stuff. We have all this swag, all that stuff's great. But the reality of the situation is that if you need to do a Google pay-per-click campaign and you have to do retargeting across LinkedIn and Facebook, it's going to cost XYZ dollars, which means get rid of the swag, get rid of the car, downsize the office. I know I'm sounding extreme, but you need to start thinking like this. Now, until more platforms come out, and I think they will eventually down the road, you have to understand that where your funnel deficiencies are and how much money it's going to cost to advertise to address those funnel deficiencies is going to impact a lot of the business decisions you're doing. And you need to have a clear mind to understand that. And it's a hard conversation for people to listen to because they've discounted Google and Facebook for years. But when I bring in the stock conversation, right away, their eyes get real big and they're like, you're right. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, stop discounting it. Because the ones that aren't discounting it are your competitors that are way out ahead of you.
Yeah, right.
So
no, that's good. That's good information. And I agree. So it must be tough, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of trust needed in this relationship that you have with these people because they are opening up everything to you. And I'm thinking if they've been spending, let's say 5% on marketing or something, and they run the numbers in their head and they go, wait a minute, I'm going to have to spend twice that to get here or 3 times or whatever. That must be some tough conversations, I guess, huh?
Yeah, some people believe it, some people don't. The thing about the board, because everything we do, it's basically a reporting dashboard that we've created, but where the value lies is the consulting with the board. So we're not just like a reporting board or a Salesforce board or, where we drop the board and we walk away. Or, hey, we'll do a bunch of webinars to teach it. No. We make sure we keep our company to a size where we can keep the clients we have, grow. We are looking to grow, but that we can actually consult, say, let's talk about the data. Let's look at stuff. We're not telling you who to hire and fire. We're not even telling you what business decisions to make. Our board, we like to call it a cyborg. It literally is looking at you. It's a referee and it's telling you what's right and what's wrong. It's not one of those like where it's trying to guess at it. Obviously, I come in and talk about my background, which I'm qualified to have this conversation with you. But we build the trust by saying, look, all we're doing is putting in front of you is exactly what you're doing right now. And we're breaking it up in a way in which the CEO and the CFO are crystal clear on what we're doing. And if I sit the marketing manager down after I go through with the CEO and CFO, the marketing manager now is going to look one of 2 ways. They're going to look back at the CFO and CEO and say, see, I told you we needed more money, or I better get my resume together because I'm going to get fired. So the board is really, it doesn't prioritize anyone's initiatives. It literally says, this is where you want to go. This is where you currently are. This is what you need to do to get there. This is how much it's going to cost. And this is the rate of return that you should be going for. The rate of return we like to look at is lifetime value ratio, which means for every dollar you put into sales and marketing, what are you getting back on the lifetime value of the customer? Lifetime value of the customer is normally established after you take out the gross margin. So it's an accurate number. So we work with companies to say, do you need to be at 5-1, 6-1, 7-1? What is that? Sometimes when you move to a certain type of number, look, that's not realistic predicated on what you're doing. But I think once you start having these conversations, you start gaining trust. Because now you're talking in a language that the CEO understands, the CFO really understands. And I think when we are normally done having a conversation with them, we run the initial audit And then we have the following quarter where the board's tracking everything you're doing. And we come back in on the second quarter and review what's happened and offer some advice. And hey, we would move things around, basically how to reallocate your money. At that stage of the game, the CEO and CFO feel really good that they no longer are in the dark on marketing. They make decisions predicated on finance. And then their goal is we're hiring an agency or we're hiring a marketing coordinator who, because of their creative mind, they're going to be able to take our product and get people to really look at our product. And we're going to make sure that they're financed enough and that they have an actual target in mind and that these are the conversations we're going to have. And I know I'm kind of rambling, but the last thing what we didn't want to do is we want to end the conversation of where you bring in the likes, the share, the traffic metrics to the CEO and the CFO because they don't care about that. They're like, we're at $1.5 million. Where are we at this quarter? Oh, yeah, we're not even close. Well, why? So you can't say, yeah, but we had a great Facebook campaign. That's irrelevant.
Yeah. So what if you find deficiencies? You're in there and it could be in personnel, could be in, they just don't have the horsepower. I mean, what do you do? How do you help?
Well, I think the best thing we can do is try to help them reallocate their customer acquisition costs. One of our very first things we go to, and I can't believe I'm saying this because technically we're a MarTech product, although we think we're more of a consulting product because it's our consulting that you're purchasing. The board just puts it in one spot for you. But 9 out of 10 times, the very first thing we'll look at is something they're doing from a MarTech perspective. Like you said, HubSpot. I'm a big fan of HubSpot. I think it's great. Mm-hmm. The problem is 50% of the people have HubSpot. They don't use it or they don't know how to use it.
They don't know how to use it.
Yeah. Or even if they're certified, they're not using it. So you have to ask yourself a question. It's like, okay, when's the contract done? Unless you're going to make a conscious effort to use HubSpot, and I highly recommend you do because I love the drip campaigns. I love everything they do. Then let's get rid of that. Because if you get rid of that money, you have that. That's sponsorship. Is that sponsorship? Is there a way? So we basically try to get them to whittle down the money, reallocate the money, and say, okay, let's start pulling the money over here where maybe you can start hiring people to fix those deficiencies. Yeah. But 9 out of 10 times, you do see that the deficiencies are happening. It's just because what they're trying to market and the funnels, they're not in sync.
Right.
And we just kind of recalibrate it and say, let's get it in sync.
So do you offer, they have objectives. You guys work with them, I guess, on the objectives too. So do you offer any consulting from a methodology standpoint to meet those objectives? I've had people, they say to me, oh, I really don't know what to do. Should I spend money here? Should I spend the money on Facebook? Should I do this? Should I do that? That's the chief marketing officer's job. But if you've got a smaller company, a $1 million, $2 million company or something like that, they might not have that ability. So do you guys get involved in that?
We do. So what we try to do is we basically try to get to the point where we give just enough information. The chief marketing officer, we can hand it off to them and let them do what they do really well. Mm-hmm. What we do is along that buyer's journey, we do what's called an investment allocation weight. So it's basically a strategy. So I'll give you for instance. Let's just say there is a company out there who financially they're doing okay. They need leads. But if we go in and currently look at the Google environment right now for pay-per-click, or let's just say they have to buy leads off Avvo or something like that, if they're an attorney and they're trying to grow the law firm out, we realize from a cost prohibitive standpoint, they're not doing too good. They don't have the money to really invest in that. Then we have to take a step back and say, okay, we need to reallocate this. And let's just say this law firm, 10 attorneys are growing, but a lot of their money right now is tied up in salary or past contracts. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then what we will do is we'll say, all right, you have time because let's just say they have cases. Yeah, they have a caseload they can get through. So they feel comfortable, but they're more worried about a year out. We'll allocate that money and say, you need to basically have the majority of your money in an awareness campaign. We have to start building out an awareness campaign so individuals are following you or know who you are so that when the time comes for a lead, the lead's going to be a little cheaper because either we're retargeting them, we already have their email or whatever it may be. So we weight allocate that. We'll say, okay, so if you have $100,000 to spend, let's do $50,000 on Facebook. Let's do $30,000 on Google Display. And let's do $20,000 on Spotify. And then let's just say we have that money will start. Then what we'll do is say quarter two, probably even quarter one. I'm kind of really sketching here,
Sure.
Sketching out. Maybe we'll try to see if they have another $20,000 in the budget. And we'll say, okay, we're going to allocate $20,000 for retargeting and geofencing across these platforms. And that's where we stop. We basically try to stay out of, we're not getting involved in creative. Okay. We're not getting involved in branding, and we're not getting involved in the actual, maybe nuts and bolts strategy, but we will tell you where it's allocated and meaning what money you should put in what platforms. And we will recommend maybe a top line strategy in which you can go with. But at that point, normally the CMO can take over. But yes, to answer your question, we do teach them and show them how to allocate that money across the buyer's journey. And as you work with us, mm-hmm. you begin to understand that. as a team, you're sitting down, you're looking at your goal, you're looking at your funnels, and now your CMO and CFO are having a great conversation. The CMO is like, okay, we need to do this across the buyer's journey. And the CFO is like, okay, we know we need this. So how much is the bidding rates? What does that look like? Then your digital manager's coming in saying, okay, I've just grabbed some bidding rates. Here's the money. Now the CFO understands why they're giving you the money, where it's supposed to go, and what the ultimate goal is. And now the CEO can be a CEO, run the company and say, my sales and marketing are on the same page. My CFO feels good. Let's go build this company. And I think we have those conversations with company because I just feel like too many times as companies, they don't have those conversations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know you're right. They don't have those conversations. So what's the journey after that? So you've done this. They have their dashboard. It's working for them. What happens? Do you go back and see them every once in a while, I guess?
Yeah. So how we do it is on a quarterly basis. If they want to, we can send on a monthly basis, although we think you might get a little bit in the weeds. On a quarterly basis, we basically send out a questionnaire, which is saying, okay, we need you to update your leads, your sales, your prospects, a various bunch of information. An email goes out to you. It takes no more than 5 minutes. Somebody, you kind of pick one point person. And so long as that email is updated, the board stays live. If you do want it monthly, you can do it monthly. If you want to do it quarterly, you can do it quarterly. And then the second email that comes out, it's a series of 2 emails, is your customer acquisition cost email. Is everything the same? Have you maybe decided to do a sponsorship? Have you decided to maybe hire another salesperson? So we basically make sure the customer acquisition cost is there. So again, either monthly or quarterly. We kind of recommend quarterly, but we do run monthly. We get that information. The board is constantly live for you. Your marketing metrics are always live because we hook everything up to Google and Facebook. And then we come out quarterly. And we either have a phone call or we consult and we have a conversation and we making sure that we're on track, that we feel like we're on track. We make sure, like a referee, that the CFO is not pulling back money, that the CMO is not saying, hey, to hell with Facebook, I want to try Pinterest. Pinterest doesn't work for you in this thing. We make sure that everybody's kind of sticking to the script. And then at the end of the year, we have a conversation and say, okay, did we meet the goals? And our thought process is, if you have a product, if you're not operating in a silo, if you're funded properly, and if you have a product that people actually want to buy, you in theory, so long as your processes are in place, you in theory should be hitting your goal. And that's kind of how we do it. We're always available for phone calls and we get emails and things like that. And there's technical support on the board. But we don't leave you. We don't just get the board and run. We are actively available and we schedule a series of 4 meetings throughout the year with you to make sure that you're on track.
Yeah, sounds like a great program, great process. So how do people get hold of you?
It's easy. They can just basically go to Commexis.com. They can fill out any information they want there for us to reach out to them. You can always find me on LinkedIn at Len Ward. And at Twitter, at Len Ward NJ. You can always reach out to me, direct message me, anything you want to do. And I'm more than happy to take a look at it. And I tell people all the time, if we get 10 people that come in and want to contact us and talk about things, I'm very blunt. 5 people we really can't help because we don't think this process and board is really meant for your type of industry. And the other 5 we love to have a conversation with. But we don't waste your time. We tell you right up front, this is what we think. And it's an hour conversation I have with you just to kind of see where you are, offer any advice I can, and to try to find out if we're fit.
Excellent. So it's Commexis, COMMEXIS.com. And we'll put all that in the show notes so people can find you. And I really appreciate talking with you and you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Yeah, no, it's good. So maybe you can go play golf now. It's the 4th of July weekend coming up and we can go do something outside.
Well, I guess they're saying Sunday, right? So that'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks, Len.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today at the Water Cooler Hangout. If you'd like to learn more about the things we talked about, you can read the show notes by going to www.bobpool.com/podcast. That's www.bobpool.com/podcast with an S. Take care and don't forget, listen first and sell later.